Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started in about 30 seconds. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Today's session is coming from the Maryland Department of Disabilities. It has been hosted and created in partnership with the National Federation of the Blind. The session today is going to be on basic web accessibility guidelines, techniques, and testing. Just to get going with introductions, my name is Andrew Drummond. I am the Director of IT Accessibility Policy and Programs. A little bit about myself. I went originally from the UK, went to school in London, which is the capital, and Leeds. Came to the US, did my graduate studies here. And I am IAAP certified in accessibility practices in relation to digital accessibility. And my partner in crime today, I'm going to hand over to Matt.
Thank you, Andrew. My name is Matt Hackert, and I lead the Center of Excellence in Nonvisual Accessibility at the National Federation of the Blind, which is headquartered here in Baltimore. I've been working in the blindness accessibility field specifically for about 6 years. I was an access technology instructor for the Nebraska Commission for the Blind, and I've then since been working at NFB here for a little over the past 3 years. So thank you for having me here, Andrew.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. I appreciate it. So just to start off with learning objectives. So by the end of the session, you're going to have an understanding of the basics of web accessibility, some of the conditions that can impact digital access. We're going to introduce you to web content accessibility guidelines, conduct some basic accessibility testing, and also we're going to have Matt, who is an expert screen reader user and a native screen reader user. Perform some basic accessibility testing and show you guys, give you guys a look at how the screen reader user accesses digital content. So what is digital accessibility? So digital accessibility in a nutshell is it's that inclusive practice of removing barriers that can prevent an end user interacting with a website, a digital tool, web application, or technology. And this would be by and for people with disabilities. Digital accessibility is obviously something that Matt and I are very passionate about. That's why we have our roles. And we've kind of dedicated a lot of our time to pushing accessibility forward here in Maryland and also in the DMV area itself. Some conditions that can impact digital accessibility. Blindness and low vision can definitely impact accessibility, can definitely impact accessing digital content, especially if the digital content is not accessible, for sure. If people have cognitive challenges, whether they have a learning disability or they have an intellectual disability, that's possible that those conditions can definitely impact digital accessibility. Fine motor challenges, things like cerebral palsy, things maybe a traumatic brain injury or another physical condition that is preventing an end user interacting with digital technology in a kind of traditional manner. Perhaps that end user needs to use assistive technologies and needs to access content that is, been coded correctly. And when we say the word coded correctly, we're talking about coded accessible in an accessible manner, because that's the only way that sites and applications and IT solutions should be coded. And then finally, deaf and hard of hearing, that can definitely impact digital accessibility if things like interpreters aren't provided or captioning isn't provided. Those types of things can definitely impact one's ability to easily access an organization or an agency's digital footprint. So why is it important? Fortunately for Maryland, we are home to some fantastic advocacy organizations. Obviously, we have our friends here from National Federation of the Blind, who we work with very closely. Per the federal government, CDC says about 22%, that's roughly about 1 in 5 Marylanders have a disability. So, the state is, very, very focused on making sure that our digital footprint is accessible. And, in instances where we find there's an issue, we work, promptly and, quickly to get this, whatever issue would be addressed. And that's a big focus for my team and for the state as well. We're really trying to make sure that all Marylanders can access, the state's digital footprint. Obviously, the impact of accessibility, so obviously improving the ability for individuals with disabilities to, conduct their business independently and interact with the state's, digital footprint. That's, in these times, in this post-COVID world that we live in, we have a reliance on technology, and we need to make sure those technology solutions are accessible for everyone. And there's really no wiggle room on this. So you've got designed accessibility versus remediation. In layman's terms, we're really looking for things to be born accessible. So as an IT solution is being built out, we want to make sure that that IT solution is being tested for accessibility throughout the dev cycle. Accessibility is just as an agency would be, or agency or an organization would be thinking about making sure that that IT solution is secure. Security is extremely important here at the state, and so is accessibility. So we have, on one hand, we have making sure that the IT solution is secure and data is protected and safe. And on the other hand, we just as equally important is making sure that our respective IT solution is accessible for all Marylanders. That is that designed accessibility. That's having that forethought and making sure that, hey, we're building out an IT solution. It needs to be accessible when it goes live and it goes into production, versus launching an IT solution and then having to go back and remediate it after the fact. There's nothing bad about remediating. In fact, it's a good thing to remediate a solution. There's things that we do. But the preference, I'm sure Matt would definitely agree, would be that designed accessible approach, making sure that these IT solutions are born accessible versus lots of backwards and forwards having to remediate a product. And also, when you're remediating a product, it costs a lot more money to remediate a product than actually to build a product accessible from the start. So if you're thinking about being, fiscally conservative and, not wasting resources, the approach would definitely be designing an accessible IT solution. And, we definitely try to instill, when we work on educating state staff and people outside of the state, that, accessibility is not a kind of one and done, hey, we got a little checklist, check all the boxes, we're good to go, we don't have to think about accessibility anymore. We have to always have in the back of our mind that accessibility is just as important as security. And accessibility, when we're every time, if we create an accessible IT solution, every time we interact with that solution, and we, as content managers, and we change any content or update that particular solution, it's possible that we can make elements of that IT solution inaccessible. So we need to remember that accessibility is not one and done. We need to keep an eye on it and making sure that that our product stays accessible. Will slides be made available after this webinar? Yes, Karen, they will be. Thanks for asking. Good question. So thinking about moving on to like the technical requirements and coding, looking at coding, design, and practice. This session, I should have prefaced, this session is really it's an entry level kind of 101 session. So if you don't have a background in coding or even content management, you just want to get your feet wet, this is an awesome session for you for sure. So introducing those WCAG, people always call it WCAG, but the full, it's the abbreviation. It's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These are basically overarching principles around accessibility. These WCAG was created by the W3C, which is the Worldwide Web Consortium, which is the WCAG standards are ISO standards. These are internationally recognized, across the planet. Maryland, we have a fantastic accessibility law, and we can definitely thank our friends at National Federation of the Blind. They were definitely key and instrumental into this. They pushed this forward, and in collaboration with the state, and we got a fantastic accessibility law. So that's known as the Non-Visual Access Clause. And so NVA, which is Maryland's law, and federal law, which is section 508, they both reference the WCAG 2.0 AA standards. There, in regards to WCAG, there's four primary principles of accessibility, and people, it's the acronym, the abbreviation is abbreviated down to the word PAW, which stands for perceivable. So that information that's present needs to be available in multiple formats, that we're not just presenting information visually, that we're also presenting it auditorily. And if we present it in a visual manner, it also needs to be, there needs to be infrastructure there. There needs to be landmarks, there need to be headings, the images need to have alt text, and the text needs to be able to be accessed. Operable would be, all elements within a particular site need to be usable by all end users, not just end users that, perhaps can see or hear, or, they can use a traditional mouse. All elements within that IT solution need to be accessible. Next, we have understandable. So that's the user interface. So the user interface and the content should behave in a manner that's consistent. So each page should operate in the same manner. So you wouldn't have, for example, you wouldn't have the nav menu at the top of the page on the home page, and then you move to the about page, the about us, and then the nav menu is like locked on the right-hand side of the screen. Or if the first thing in, the DOM order would be skip the main content on the home page, then on the about us page, then you've got the skip the main content block is going to be halfway down in the DOM order, which makes no sense. So we're just making sure that things are done in a consistent manner. Finally, very importantly, the R of PAW is robust. So content and the user interface has to work with assistive technology. So that hidden infrastructure needs to be there. The landmarks needs to be there. Matt is the expert of such work, and he will get into that a little bit later as well. And he'll show you how assistive technology works with accessible content. So we got some basic accessibility requirements. I've put down a few things here that I think they're important. First, making sure that we have good alt text for non-text content. So we got to make sure that we've all those images are on there. We've got iframes titled. If we've got canvas, if we're using the canvas element, and we know that's inaccessible, we've got an ARIA description. Moving on to like headings and navigational landmarks, making sure we've got headers, making sure we've got footers, making sure we've got main, making sure that we're using those HTML5 landmarks, and making sure that we have that important heading infrastructure. Sometimes people like, oh, I really like the size of H2. I really like the size of H3, and they're designing their site based on how they like the looks of the heading sizes, when in fact, that's not how heading structure should be organized. It should be based on importance, like H1 should be used once per page. H2 could be used as many times as you need to. Then you'd have H3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and so on, and going down in a descending order. Next, we want to make sure that all websites and web applications are keyboard navigable. This has to happen. There are some users who can't use a mouse. They're quite few. In fact, quite many. There are many end users that cannot use a mouse or a touchpad or a touchscreen. So that means the keyboard functionality of that site has to work. So all of the elements that are supposed to be focusable need to be focusable. All of the elements that need to be inside of keyboard tab order or inside of keyboard tab order. You don't want to have a button at the bottom of the screen that maybe the button that says submit is outside of keyboard tab order. The end user would get there and it would just skip right past submit, and that end user would basically be in a cycle of never being able to submit unless he had someone else's assistance. Having someone else's assistance to do work on the internet is not appropriate. Okay, next we've got use of color and contrast. We're making sure that we're not using color to convey meaning. Please, for example, that would be click on the red submit button. What happens if you don't know what red looks like? What happens if you can't see the submit button? What happens if you're colorblind and there's multiple buttons and there's red and there's green buttons on there and you can't differentiate between the different colors of the button. So it's really important that we don't use color to convey meaning. It's also obviously very important that we have the right color contrast used throughout the site. So people with low vision, visual difficulties, are able to access that site. We have an absolutely massive number of end users who are non-visual, and some of the folks were born blind or went blind later and during childhood, and now in Maryland and across the globe, we have more and more people losing this sight in the 60s, 70s, and 80s too. So they're becoming non-visual access users after being sighted for many, many years. And it's really important that these sites are coded correctly. So if you've got a form on a site, making sure the form fields are labeled and making sure if an error appears, that there's a way to validate that error. So an end user is not sitting trapped on the form, not realizing they've mistyped in the zip code. They've got a letter in the zip code instead of just numbers. The form is not going to, if the form is not coded correctly, it's not going to alert them. They're just going to sit there and think everything's fine, and they're clicking submit, and it's saying submit. We've got web applications. It's vital to make sure that they're accessible. And if the web app has, if they're using maybe they're using a canvas element or they're using another element which is inaccessible, we need to provide a way of providing alternate information, whether that's perhaps that's through ARIA or some other type of alert within that particular application. Moving on to alt text. Alt text is extremely important. We need to make sure that alt text explains the purpose and the subject. It needs to be concise. Shouldn't be lengthy. It shouldn't be a page long. It needs to be just as minimal amount of words as possible that describes exactly what's happening on screen. If you've got a website and you've got a picture, maybe you just got a stock photo up there. It might be a man, shaking another man's hand, or a woman shaking another woman's hand, and maybe it's a business deal. It's signifying like commerce. If that picture's not relevant, me personally, I'd say just remove the picture. But if you really want that picture in there, okay, great. Then you should probably, I know Matt would agree. Then let's use the empty alt attribute. Let's use the null alt attribute. And making sure that when we use that null alt attribute, nobody can see it on the screen, but that end user who's relying on assistive technologies, the screen reader will skip that decorative image and move on to the actual, main content. Wherever possible, we should not use text and images to convey a message. Used to see that a lot on older websites where people would, copy, get stock images, and within those images had words I mean, that's not appropriate. And we definitely shouldn't do that. When we're describing the alt text, we're trying to refrain from photo of, image of, and graphic of, and just describe what you're saying. Looking at like logos, for example, it could say, Maryland Department of Disabilities logo. It could be, Department of IT logo. And just, whatever that particular logo is, not just using the word logo, because logo doesn't mean anything. Like, how do you know what logo means? You have to make sure that the end user has context, so they can understand what's happening in your site. It's not just a good user experience, but it's just what we should do for, every site. For people with and without disabilities, good accessible websites are also websites that are good accessible sites are also typically good websites that provide the end user with a great user experience. If we've got complex images, charts, and graphs, we should obviously put the title summary in the alt text and then try to provide a breakdown through other means. So that would be, maybe we use a table. Maybe that's a great way to, maybe we're using a table, or we use some type of a data table, or that's a great way to, for example, thinking about something like maybe, we're not thinking about it as much now, but like maybe COVID, COVID infection rates. That's data there that's can be quite complex if you're looking at throughout a state or throughout a a municipality. That data could be, instead of just being in a chart or graph, that you tabulate that data so that everybody could access it. You got headings and landmarks. We've already touched on this quite a bit, so making sure that heading structure is heading infrastructure is coded up, marked up correctly. Making sure that sections of the site should start with headings. Headings aren't picked on based on the size of the text. They're actually picked on that semantic infrastructure, making sure that the infrastructure is logical and coherent. Keyboard only functionality. As I'd already mentioned about keyboard functionality, this is super important, making sure that we can get through all of those elements and reach that content. We should be able to tab and shift tab through all of the elements that we need to interact with. This should always be a visible focus indicator that's color contrast compliant, so we know where focus lies. Really important. And then finally, screen readers rely on keyboard functionality. So using native HTML, using native code is extremely important. And when needed, you can perhaps use ARIA as well to assign roles and behaviors. You got use of color. We've already gone into this. We've talked about making sure that we're not using color to convey meaning. We're making sure that the text is easy to read in comparison to, so if you've got like the bright red text on the screen, as you can see, for those that can see the screen, we've got bright red text on the screen, we have a black background. So we've got examples on the screen of what would be passing. It's a 4.5 to 1 ratio, or 3 to 1 ratio for large print text. We're going to show you a tool, how you can test for this too. We already touched on forms and labels and errors. So obviously making sure that all form fields have some form of labeling method. Labels need to be clear and concise. Detected errors, we already got into that, making sure that those errors are identified in text. Required fields must be programmatically identified there. Also needs to be a review step if you're submitting a financial form or other type of user controllable data. There needs to be that review step or confirmation step before action is taken, so that end user knows you're about to submit this document. Very important. Web apps. So sometimes web apps can be a little bit tricky. It's definitely important to make sure that that app has a clear, discernible interface that works with assistive technology. It cannot only, the interface cannot only, it works fine with a mouse. Well, that's not acceptable. It's got to work fine with the keyboard too as well. It's, the whole user face has to be keyboard navigable, not just to be able to navigate around it, but actually be able to use full functionality as well. This is something that we communicate a lot to vendors. So as they're building out this beautiful looking IT solution, like, that's great, build that a solution out, but also making sure that content and user interface is fully accessible. So you've got manual testing, plan and management procedures. So thinking about manual testing, you got to look at your site and say, well, how many pages do I have? Do I have 10 pages or do I have 50,000? And then prioritize which pages you're going to test. If you have all the time in the world, you can test every single page. If you don't, maybe you should test a sampling of those pages. You can perhaps use Google Analytics and say, oh, well, these are my most 15 visitors pages. I'm going to do a dive test on those. That would be a great management approach. So your procedures and techniques. We've got using keyboard functionality. We've got looking at color contrast testing. We've got screen reader testing. We've got lots of procedures and techniques there. I want to get into some of the tools now. Looking at the testing and testing management. So, as we said, do you look at the home page? Do you look at the main pages, sub pages, template variants? This is just a continuation of what we just talked about. Manual testing tools. You've got some examples of some tools. We'll get into some of those today. We have the HTML inspector. We have Andy. We have color contrast analyzer. We have the screen reader, and also an option would be a readability test. So we have just on the screen right now, for those that can see the screen, we have just a screenshot of WCAG website and the HTML inspector open. So it's a great way to look for code issues. You just hover over the element, right click, hit inspect, and you get a look at the HTML. A great way to learn HTML as well. We use Inspector daily when we test as we're looking through for issues. So I'm going to look at manual testing. So I'm going to do a short demo on Andy. And let me get this fired up. Okay, so we should now see, we're looking at the Premier League website. Obviously, I'm from the UK, super obsessed with soccer, or as we call it back home, football. And I'm going to just give you a quick run through Andy. So Andy's it's a testing tool that the federal government created. It's used within the Trusted Tester program. Andy allows you to manually inspect elements. It also does some automated work for you as well. You can look through, it has multiple modules, focusable elements, graphics, links and buttons, tables, structure, color contrast, hidden content, iframes. So let's just have a little look through focusable elements. So we can move through the elements. We can see we have the pink circle around the icon. It's saying what the Andy output would be. So this is what a screen reader would read. Andy, it would read Aston Villa, Brentford, good, it's going through. The last time we looked at the site, none of these things were actually marked up correctly. So there would just be nothing there. So as we look through the site, we can see that Andy's outputting what would happen. and what would be said with a screen reader. So this is, this is great. This is very appropriate. And it can also be used to look at the graphics. We can go through, it would give graphic alert. Next, we could look at links and buttons to see if there's any issues with buttons. It appears there are issues with the links. So you can hit view link list, and then you can scroll down and look through, and it'll tell you if there's the links there. It'll show if there's any bad links too. You can hit structure, and it will show you the landmarks to the site, which is fantastic. It'll also show you heading structure. For this site, we have, you can see there's one H1 here for the Premier League, and then they've skipped heading levels because they jumped to H4, and the first one should be H2. And then if you look on the site, in fact, there's multiple H1s and no H2s. So the Premier League haven't done a super good job with the structure of this site. You can also use color contrast, and it will, whatever element is in focus, it will see whether it's a pass or a fail, or hey, you need to go in and further manually test it. I'm going to just transition away from Andy, and we're going to look at color contrast testing tool, accessible color picker. Just click on the Doppler there, and we can just, let's look at that white text there. Grab that pixel. Now we're going to click on the background, and let's see if it's Vectex. Okay, so unfortunately, this menu here doesn't actually meet color contrast compliance. This is going to score 1.18, and it's a red there, so that would be in fact inaccessible. Okay, we're going to get back to our slide deck, our presentations. Let me continue. So we had a chance to have a look at Andy, color contrast analyzer, and I just want to get into real quick looking at mobile testing modalities. When you're looking at mobile sites, I'm using testing through mobile. You've got three main modalities. You've got Android, iOS, and iOS testing on mobile using those native accessibility features that are built into the device. You've got Android and iOS testing on tablets. Obviously, the tablet view is different. And then you've also finally got using just a responsive window within a desktop. So you just resize it and be responsive and see how it looks when trying to test on mobile. Things we're looking at, making sure, we got a few things. Looking at autoplay, so making sure if anything autoplays on the site, you can pause it, you can stop it, and you can hide it. So that would be multimedia content. We want to make sure that text is resizable, that you've got the hamburger button on the top left hand of the screen, side of the screen, that you can resize text up to 200%, and the text is not going to, there's not going to be text overflow issues, and things are going to start crashing into each other. We want to make sure there's consistent navigation, colors not being used to convey meaning, and that the screen reader works. And we're now moving to Matt. We've got the pleasure of Matt Hackett, and he's going to take over the remainder of the session.
Thanks, Andrew. So I thought really what I would spend the majority of my piece of the presentation here is doing a demonstration of a screen reader on a website, showing kind of a real world practice, what this looks like, how it works when it's done reasonably well, when things are accessible. So I'm going to take a moment and just get my screen share fired up here. And let's see. Okay.
Share desktop meeting controls. Live transcription closed.
Okay.
Window list dialog. Homepage national. Homepage.
So first of all, as Andrew pointed out, I am blind,
Screen share.
and I'm a native screen reader user.
Participants can up.
The screen reader that I'm using currently is JAWS. There are actually several options out there on the Windows platform. JAWS is a commercial product from Freedom Scientific. NVDA, or Non-Visual Desktop Access, is a free open source screen reader by NV Access. And finally, Microsoft has a native screen reader called Narrator built into the Windows operating system. There are also other screen readers available, but these are probably have the largest share of use. Of course, on Apple's side, VoiceOver is their native screen reader. On Android with mobile tablets and phones, TalkBack is usually the screen reader available there. So I will take a minute and slow the speech down in a moment for you so that everybody in the audience can understand what's happening, but just wanted to take a moment and demonstrate so you can hear a little bit about how a native proficient screen reader user will typically listen to their screen reader. So I'm at the top of our National Federation of the Blind website, and I'll take just a moment and let the screen reader read down the page for a moment, just so you can get a taste of what that sounds like.
Heading level 1, link, welcome to the movement. Link, transformative membership and advocacy. Heading level 2, you can live the life you want. Blindness is not what holds you back. The National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. Every day we raise the expectations of blind people because low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. Separate dreams. So
anyway, that gives you a sense, and that's about the rate that I typically listen to it. Believe it or not, there are people that will listen to their screen reader at a faster rate even than that. Again, for the purposes here and in the spirit of accessibility, because I imagine most of you probably couldn't understand much or any of that, I'm going to slow the speech rate down.
Homepage, National Federation of the Blind. Slower, 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 slower.
And we'll try not to make it too painfully slow for most people, but this should be a comfortable speech rate.
No prior headings. Blank. Welcome to the movement, heading level 1 link.
All right. So where we are at, and this time hopefully you caught most of that, we are at the heading 1 on the website for the National Federation of the Blind. As Andrew said, best practices, there should only be one heading 1 on this page. And if I press the key to navigate to a heading 1,
no more headings at level 1.
We indeed see that this is the only heading 1 on this page. As Andrew said, it's important to use headings based on logical structure of content rather than formatting. You know, of course, you can code and override what a heading 1 looks like and what a heading 2 looks like and what a heading 3 looks like. But to someone who's blind, or even in many cases, people who are low vision, the font size and weight and the typeface don't make any difference. They just hear the words spoken and or feel the words in Braille. Sometimes people use a refreshable Braille display, which is a physical hardware device that connects to a computer, and it interfaces with the screen reader so that more or less everything that you're hearing JAWS speak out loud is also being displayed in contracted Braille on a refreshable line of Braille cells, where there are pins that raise up and down that mimic the patterns of Braille dots. So won't go into that too much more right now for the purposes here, but that is another way, and that's of course for someone who is deaf blind, where they have multiple sensory loss. Sometimes a refreshable Braille display is their primary or exclusive means of receiving output from a computer, because even the speech from a screen reader is inaccessible to them. But in both cases, things like use of color are important, because there's no color to Braille cells any more than there is color to the speech being output. Anyway, so moving on from there, we're going to talk about just a few different ways that a blind screen reader user will navigate through a page. We'll start with the very basic and kind of move to more and more advanced ideas of how to move through a page. And this will as this kind of builds up, it will show you really the importance of those different navigational landmarks that Andrew was talking about. So again, as you see, our focus is back at the top of the page where it says, welcome to the movement. And the first demonstration here is simply going to be using the arrow keys. So it wouldn't matter if I were using JAWS or NVDA or Narrator or some other screen reader. This mode of navigation is inherent to the operating system. These are keys that even without a screen reader, you could move focus using the arrow keys to go through a page. And so we'll read down for a few lines and give you a taste of what was being read at lightning speed earlier.
Link transformative membership and advocacy. Blank. Heading level 2. You can live the life you want. Blindness is not what holds you back. The National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. Every day we raise the expectations of blind people because low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. Blank. Separator. Blank. Heading level 3. News and events. Article. Visited Link National Convention. Visited heading level 4. Link National Convention. The National Federation of the Blind National Convention.
All right, I'll stop there. So you got a chance to see a couple of different elements here. There was both regular text and heading text. And if I go down far enough, we'll actually run into some graphics where there's some alt text. I'll skip ahead and just get to
visited link
one of
article
those.
N article visited link we're with visited heading left support this effort visited link article N article link publications and media heading level 4 link the National Fed link read more article end heading level 3 featured programs article link NFB heading level the NFB Bell Academy.
Let's see.
Illustration of 5 sets of hands clapping. The scholarship program is one of our most important initiatives. Congratulations to the 30 finalists recently announced. Get to know our 2022 scholarship finalists. Link graphic.
So there's an example. I had to just kind of skip down to it, but there's an example of alt text on a graphic. Obviously, again, this has to be user generated. This kind of alt text. You can certainly at this time, with tools like Google has some artificial intelligence that will construct very rough approximations of alt text where it can recognize objects, but for the most part, they're not nearly as descriptive as this and almost never convey the actual purpose or meaning behind why that graphic is there and what information it's intended to convey. The next thing that we're going to talk about is those heading levels, heading structure and heading levels that Andrew has talked about. So I'm going to jump back up to the heading 1 of the page.
Welcome to the movement heading level 1 link.
Now, JAWS, as in with most other screen readers, has a library of keyboard shortcut keys that are kind of referred to as quick navigation commands. And almost the whole alphabet gets used for website navigation, for navigating by different elements, including links, headings, structures like lists and tables, articles, regions, just to give some examples. So for headings specifically, one can use the letter H to simply move to the next heading on the page, regardless of what level that heading is. And one can also use the numbers 1 through 6 to navigate by just headings of that respective letter or number. So if you wanted to actually move to the next heading 3 from this point, you could, instead of hitting H until you get to a heading 3, you could simply press the number 3 and focus would skip in tab order to the next heading 3 on the web page. So to demonstrate, I'm going to press the letter H a few times and let it read each heading and let you know what heading level it is.
You can live the life you want. Blindness is not what holds you back. Heading level 2. News and events heading level 3. National Convention visited heading level 4 link. We're with you. A benefit concert to help the blind of Ukraine visited heading level 4 link.
So I want to stop here and again point out that these went sequentially. So we first were
You
at
can live the life you want. Blindness is not what holds you back. Heading level 2.
you can live the life you want. Blindness is not what holds you back. So this is a broad main section of the page. Next, there was a heading at level 3.
News and events heading level 3.
This starts the news and events, which is a subsection under Live the Life You Want. And then the first news article,
National Convention visited heading level 4 link.
talks about National Convention, and that's a heading 4. And all of the subsequent articles that are part of news and events are also all heading 4. So as a screen reader user, to help more quickly and efficiently navigate the page, instead of pressing H and going through all of the news and events articles, I can press 3, and that will jump to the next heading 3, higher level section on the page.
Featured programs heading level 3.
And so now we're at heading level 3, featured programs. And now, presumably, the next heading might be a heading 4. That's one of the featured programs. And so if I just press H from here.
NFB Bell Registered Academy heading level 4 link.
Sure enough, the next heading is a heading 4, NFB Bell Academy, which is NFB's Braille literacy program. And so obviously that's kind of parallel or equivalent to the heading 4 of each news article that was in the previous heading 3 section of the page. I'm going to pause here for just a moment in case anyone has questions. I guess, Andrew, we didn't talk too much about how you might want to handle that, but if you see any questions in the chat.
Yeah, I don't see any questions so far, Matt. Usually we kind of do them right at the end.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Yep. So we'll jump back up to the top of the page.
Welcome to the movement heading level 1 link.
Of course, another way that someone might navigate through a page to just get a sense of things, or if they know that they're looking for something specific, might be to skip by all of the hyperlinks on the page. And so an operating system native command to do that is using the tab key, and that will just go to the next hyperlink regardless of whether it's visited or not.
Main region, article region, National Convention link. National Convention heading level 4 link visited. Register now for National Convention link. Article region, we're with you, a benefit concert to help the blind of Ukraine link.
So you can tell as we tab through some of these, it will announce whether the link is visited or not. There weren't any of this type in these couple of links here, but JAWS and other screen readers will tell you if it's a same page link, meaning it will just jump focus to a different area on the same page, whether it's a mail to link. So if someone's email address were here, that's a specific hyperlink called a mail to link, and it does distinguish those, and it distinguishes between visited and unvisited links. And so if I knew that there was a link that I have been to before, but again, don't necessarily know the name of, there is one of those quick nav shortcut keys that some of them change depending on screen reader, but I can press in JAWS the letter V.
We're with you, a benefit concert to help the blind of Ukraine heading level 4 link visited. Learn about the benefit concert We're with you visited link. National Federation of the Blind. Click to return to home page. Visited link graphic.
So now each time I press V, the next link that it goes to is a visited link, whereas I could press the letter U, and now the links that I go to will all be links that I have not visited before.
Donate link. Join us link. 41065999314 link. NFB at nfb.org send mail link.
And there's an example of a send mail link. That's the general mail address for information about the NFB, and it announces it as send mail. So we'll go back again to the top of the page.
Welcome to the
Another feature that's common in many screen readers is to provide users lists of many common elements. I don't believe the way I configured the screen share, I don't think these dialog boxes are going to show up because they're part of the screen reader instead of part of the web page that's shared. But as an example,
Matt, they're not showing up, Matt. They're not showing up.
Yeah.
links list dialog.
Yeah, it's not going to show up just because of how I shared just the window. But
Right.
what's up here is a dialog box with a list of all of the hyperlinks on the web page, so I can arrow up and down.
National Convention, 13 of 113. National Convention. Register now for National Convention. We're with you. A benefit.
So those are just some of the links on the web page, but instead of tabbing to them or arrowing to them, they're all just in a convenient list box, and I could press enter on any of those to move focus to that link and activate that link. Likewise, there are shortcuts to bring up lists of headings and other form fields on a page, which is a good segue to kind of the next thing that I thought might be useful to demonstrate is looking at a page that has some form control elements. So this will take me just a minute to get to, but I want to show you the web page for registering for our events, and not that I'm necessarily trying to promote that, but it has some checkboxes and edit fields. So,
NFB.org/CENA selected.
So this is going to load our Center of Excellence page.
https://nfb.org. One frame, 13. Login visited link. Center of Excellence in Nonvisual Access visited link. Complementary region, navigation region, list with 16 items, list with 9 items, international Braille and tech, trainings link. Events, trainings, and accessibility boutiques national. Skip the main content, banner region, national, navigation region, list with one item, navigation region, list with 2 items. Join us link. Enter the terms you wish to search button. Our community, leaving menus, complementary region, free white cane program link. Events, trainings, and accessibility, main region, article region, Center of Excellence in Nonvisual, register for the Linux accessibility boutique link.
Okay, so we'll bring up here comes the registration page.
Accessibility boutique registration national.
And I'll slow this back down again.
Slower. Accessibility boutique registration heading level 1.
So again, I'm going to arrow down through this page a little bit to give you a sample of what it sounds like.
Blank. Please complete the following form to register to attend one or more of our upcoming accessibility boutiques and seminars. Blank. Note, all fields with an asterisk star are required.
Now note here that this is sometimes a place where people make the mistake of using color to convey meaning. Sometimes you'll see the same message just denote that all fields in red are required. However, again, as Andrew pointed out, for someone who's colorblind, for someone using a screen reader, the red text is indistinguishable from any other color text. So our convention is to use an asterisk for required fields. But I'll continue going through here.
Blank. Which events would you like to attend? You must select at least one event. However, you may select multiple events. Blank. June 28th boutique. Intro to Linux for blind users. Checkbox not checked.
So here is a checkbox. As a screen reader user, you can simply press the space bar
Main region,
to select,
participant type, select all that apply. June 28th boutique. Hit blank. Which events would you blank? June 28th.
Okay, it did select the checkbox. It just focus went somewhere else when it happened. And that may be something for us to go back and look at.
9 o'clock 10:30 .m. East blank. First name star. Required invalid entry edit.
And this one is
first name editor,
an edit field. And so what I'm doing here in order to interact with this field is I'm putting the screen reader into what's called forms mode. And now I can type into the field. Whereas before, if I had typed those letters, the screen reader would interpret those as those quick navigation keys, and I would not be able to type in the field. So these different field types are also elements that you can navigate by.
Virtual PC.
If I take it back out of forms mode, I can press the letter E.
Last name edit. Job title edit. Organization edit.
And I can look and skip to all of the edit boxes that are on this page. Likewise, I can press the letter X, which is for
Participant
checkboxes.
type select all that apply group. Individual.
I could press A to go to radio buttons.
No radio buttons.
Which there aren't any on this field. Perhaps of most importance, there's a shortcut key to navigate by buttons themselves. So if I press the letter B,
submit button.
There's the submit button.
Wrapping to top, search button.
And there's the search button that's related to
search.
The search edit field.
Navigation region search, edit search button. Virtual PC.
So those are some of the common screen elements in a web page. Of course, there are more beyond that. We've talked a little bit about regions. Of course, it's good to have a main region on a page, which is where all the main content resides. JAWS in particular has a shortcut key specifically for main regions, as well as
main region.
Finding other regions like navigation regions.
Visited link graphic National Federation of the Blind. Click to navigation region.
So I'm trying to think graphics. We talked just slightly about alt text before, and we had some good examples back on the NFB homepage. And we'll go back there.
Address and web.
And
NFB.org selected.
We'll let that load really quick.
https://nfb.org. Illustration of 5 sets of hands clapping the scholarship. Slower.
And we listen to
slower.
There we go. And we listen to this one particular alt text, but I'll give examples of a couple of the other images on this page that have alt text.
Purple insulin pump attached to a belt on the hip of a person graphic. Blind man at computer desk with braille display in front of keyboard graphic. So
this is, these just kind of demonstrate very basically how and why you use alt text. I imagine if we did a survey of everybody attending this webinar and asked each of you to write how you would describe these pictures, we would probably get as many answers as there are people submitting them, because there are so many ways that you can describe a picture. But really the important thing to include in alt text is why the image is there, what are the key elements in the context of the article or the other content that's kind of attached with the image. So it should kind of answer that question. Well, why is this image here? What's important about it? What should I take away from knowing that image is there? So I think that covers most all of the main points about how screen readers work when navigating the web. So I don't know, Andrew, if either you had some additional points that I missed covering, or at this point, again, I think
I have a little bit more. I have one more slide that I can talk about. So
that sounds great.
Then we can wrap up. Thanks, Matt. That was an awesome demo. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew.
Speech on demand.
Okay. Again, Matt, thank you very much. I appreciate it, Matt. So we just want to kind of just go over, this is a great way to wrap things up. It's our testing checklist. Some things to think about, and these are good things to note down for sure. We're going to provide everybody a copy of the slide deck. we're also this will be uploaded to Maryland Department of Disabilities website. So it's going to be, so it's been recorded, and we'll share that out as well so people can access the recording too. What's nice is we also we're fortunate enough we'll have captioning was available today, and also we have ASL interpreter, making sure that all potential end users are covered. So training checklist, things to definitely consider making sure that we have on your site is that skip to main content link. I've seen a few different names of this, but usually skip to main content is good. Obviously, making sure that you skip to that main content block. It should be the first focusable item. So if you hit tab, that's the first thing that should pop up. It should be clear. It should be discernible, and it should be activated. And again, it should be first in the DOM order. You got header and nav menu links, making sure that your heading structure and that nav, then the links within the nav menu they're put down in a logical order, making sure they make sense and they're coherent, so you don't have things jumping all over the place, because that's not just confusing for someone who's a non-visual access user, but also just confusing for a lot of people. Again, accessible coding and accessible markup is just good markup and good coding. Again, yep, head level structures, making sure we have all those HTML5 landmarks that need to be in there, should be in there. Sometimes you come across sites and there's minimal landmarks, and it's important to use those landmarks as well. Obviously, assistive technologies are relying on those landmarks. Matt definitely went in and did a fantastic job talking about graphics and alt text and the importance of good, descriptive, concise alt text. Making sure all those elements either intended to be in keyboard tab order or definitely in keyboard tab order, making sure everything's keyboard navigable and functional. Not so, okay, you can tab to it, but can you actually activate it? Very important. Looking at complex language. So if you've got a website that's, sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. So if a website's just super complex, the content is, very high, is a high school, 12th or 13th grade reading level. It's really important that you try and refrain from that where you can, but if the content is just so rich that it has to be like that. But if it's a public facing website, whether it's a state website or municipality website, you should be looking to try to have that reading level down as low as possible. You want to make sure that everybody can access that content, and sometimes that means making sure that Flesch Kid reading score is a little lower, just so that potentially people with learning disabilities, dyslexia, can or an intellectual disability can access the content. If your content can be written in a simple and pragmatic manner, then it should be. So obviously we've talked a lot about forms and menus and buttons. They're also, make sure you check all of those if you're going through testing. As you're going through task completion, you're doing, the persona testing. So as you're going through testing, think about, looking at how would this website be if I was deaf or hard of hearing? How would it be that? Is that YouTube video you uploaded to your website, is that actually accessible? Are you just relying on automated captions, which are probably going to be about 60-70% accurate? We shouldn't really, if we're uploading a YouTube video to your site, you really need to make sure those videos are manually captioned. And then again, making sure that when you're creating a website, or if you're testing a site, or you're interacting with content, making sure that you do thorough testing and making sure that site is accessible for all Marylanders, or all end users wherever your locality is. This is now the time for questions. If anyone has any questions, this will be a great time to start throwing them in the chat, and we will we'll answer between Matt and I. Will answer those questions as best we can. So Matt, if you want to answer the question or whatever, you can do that. Do we have any questions? Okay, Matt, it looks like we did such a fantastic job. We don't have any questions at all.
No questions. That's amazing. Well,
Oh,
good on both of us.
Well, we got one popped up. So I guess do you recommend the use of any particular plugins or tools for websites? John, are you talking about in regard to testing or what? Oh, for accessibility. So if you're looking at all plugins, plugins. Matt, would you like to speak on overlays? So
Yeah. So first of all, for those who aren't aware, a plugin, there are several accessibility companies who are advertising web plugins where there's essentially a few lines of code that you can enter it at the top of your web page, and it redirects to some JavaScript or some other code on their back end that overlays the website with some modifications that ostensibly make the site more accessible, more navigable for people with disabilities. And some of the more sophisticated ones have different profiles for someone with seizures, for someone with a learning disability, for someone with low vision, someone with no vision. But anyway, they run these kind of automated tools that make some kind of real-time changes to the code. Here at the NFB, the CENA team have tested several websites that have employed overlays, and exactly 0 of them have improved the accessibility of the website. And in many cases, they have actually made the accessibility worse. They have broken access to certain features or elements on the page, form fields like radio buttons suddenly becoming invisible to the screen reader, or buttons no longer function. So at this time, while the NFB does not discourage development of any particular technology, we have yet to see this technology actually fulfill the purposes for which they're being advertised. The providers of these services are not delivering on the promises that they say that these overlays will bring.
yeah, Matt, I'm definitely in agreement. I know that my little team, we're not recommending overlays or plugins at this time whatsoever. So I know, Matt, we both obviously work in the accessibility field. I don't really know anybody who works in this field who's recommending plugins, these type of accessibility plugins, with the exception of the companies selling them.
No, I don't either. I've never seen anybody
Nobody.
who's an access tech specialist recommend any of them.
So John, I hope that answers your question. So we definitely wouldn't be steering any, at least I wouldn't steer any state agency towards any of those solutions. Absolutely not. Any more questions? And John, that was a great question. So today's session was definitely an introduction to kind of get your feet wet. And it was a quick look at a couple of the different testing tools. For those that are more interested in getting a more in-depth, getting your feet further into the mud and learning a little bit more, I believe the National Federation of the Blind are doing a good session on accessibility testing soon. Matt, is that right?
Yes, I think 2 parts. I want to say in August and September, or it might be July and August. I have to get the dates straight, but one of them is on document accessibility more specifically, but then we're also doing a reprise on web accessibility testing, talking about both manual and automated testing.
And I see lots of state employees in the participants list and on the sign-up list. I highly recommend state employees to attend the NFB sessions. Quite often it's either Matt or people on his team that are presenting, and quite often it's myself and Stephen Plachek who we work together. He's also from the state. we work collaboratively and we do presentations together. The NFB does lots of really good work, and we try to partner with them whenever possible. So we have a question from Laura. Do you recommend any readability checkers over others? Actually, tell you the truth, what I've recommended for a long time is the simplest way, and not spending any money, is just using the readability checker in Word. Barry List has a question. Could you review how to create tables that are accessible? Barry, we have I don't know if we have time to answer that within the time we have left. I would say that when creating accessible tables, to make sure that the table descriptions are added, to make sure the header row is added. Matt, can you think of anything else off the top of your head really quickly?
Yeah, those are the big things, the header rows and the column headers and row headers, so that they read as you navigate through. But yeah, there's a lot to get into.
Yeah, sorry. Great question, Barry, but I don't think we can answer that. And we have like 90 seconds left. I don't think we can quite answer that fully. Hopefully table description and headers and header rows, and making sure that obviously you should only tabulate, data, and what else I mean, that's the only thing I can quite think of, like in such a short space of time. However, I believe the NFB will probably get into creating accessible tables at their upcoming sessions. You think, Matt?
Definitely, yeah, especially at the document accessibility. That one I'm pretty sure will be in July. That'll be after our convention this summer. And I know Kennedy gets into tables in Microsoft Word and PDFs. So
absolutely. So Barry, I hope to see you at that session. If anyone has any other questions, we've got about 60 seconds. I want to respect everybody's time. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate your time, mate. That was a good session, and everyone, we appreciate your time for attending. And whether if you work for the state or you work for municipal government or private sector, we look forward to seeing you at future Maryland Department of Disability sessions and future National Federation of the Blind sessions. Both of us are really trying to push accessibility forward and make sure accessibility is in everyone's forethought.
thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone.
Yep. Bye for now, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.